Welcome to the Enlight.Life podcast with Alexandra Cousins. Together we'll demystify disease and the debates around health, empowering you toward real regeneration and a life of vibrant vitality.
How are you doing?
I'm great. Welcome. I just immediately, my new strategy is before we even get started, even though we've never chatted before, I just hit record because typically the best conversations happen before I hit record.
Sure.
And so I just want to capture everything that we say. So first of all, thank you, Jay, for joining me here. And I have to say, I'm almost a little bit starstruck.
Don't be starstruck.
I'm kidding, but I've been following you, for quite a while. In fact, I want to share because my audience is kind of going to go, why are you having Jay Campbell on your podcast, right? Because in some ways, I really come from the world of detox, everything organic, and that whole world was my world for so many years. And then since I hit perimenopause, everything that I was doing before stopped freaking working, right? I mean,
Right.
This is just what happens to kind of every woman out there. And I had to really look for new answers. And then, of course, it wasn't just me, but it was also my other clients that were having issues that we couldn't resolve with normal things. And that's when 5 years ago, I started looking into peptides. And actually, the first thing that I found was peptide bioregulators, the whole, studies on that the Russians did.
Sure.
And that just completely blew my mind. And then from the peptide bioregulators, I went into peptides, which typically, as you will know, they come really from the world of bodybuilding. And most people that are well versed in peptides are bodybuilders. And I think that's why a lot of us conventional people, as you call them, normies, we kind of go,
You're definitely not a normie, but yes, I understand where you're going.
yeah. And I put myself somewhere in the middle because I certainly was a normie. And, then reality awoke me to the fact that nobody's going to come and help you. No doctor's going to come and help
Right.
you. People just don't know how to actually fully regenerate the body. And that's the reality. And that's when 10 years ago, I had to roll up my sleeves and go, I don't want to live like this anymore. Life in a body is supposed to be enjoyable,
Right.
according to some. That's what I
Right.
heard. I had never had that experience. And so, the whole intention was I want to now make my life enjoyable. And that's been my journey for the last 10 years. So in this conversation today, I really want to have a conversation around peptides more from an unconventional perspective. So not from your usual, we want to be maximum optimized and so forth, but really I want to bring the conversation of peptides and the magic of peptides to people that are kind of going like, okay, we don't like bodybuilders. We don't want to get into bodybuilding, that whole world, because that was me.
Yeah.
And because for the first, I think I've been subscribed to your emails for at least a couple of years.
Nice.
And only, and I was always like, I'm not going to look at that stuff because he's a bodybuilder.
Yeah.
And then once I started getting deeply into the therapeutic peptides, I was like, well, let's see what Jay Campbell had to say. And I've been, I really have to commend you on the content that you create, because I would say it's some of the best out there, if not the best out there on peptides, for sure.
Yeah.
And I'm always super impressed with, the extent of studies that you cite. So you don't just kind of go, oh, take this stuff, it's amazing. But you really provide some incredible in-depth information. And also, I love the fact that in more cases than none, you really tell people start with small doses, whereas most people out there, again, they give you dosages that, as you well know, are just completely crazy.
Yeah. Well, the pharmaceutical industry is obviously designed to make money. And so they're always going to tell people, especially with, GLP-1 peptides, which are obviously all the rage right now in the world because they do a lot of great stuff. But it's always going to be starting high and then titrating higher. Whereas like my motto in life, and by the way, I'm not a bodybuilder, I'm a biohacker. Actually, I like to say I'm an ancient alchemist in the
I like
guise
that.
of Jay Campbell in this current incarnation. But it's always about starting low and going slow because we have to assess our unique biochemical individuality or our N of one. Like I told you, I would obviously love to talk about consciousness. And that's why we're doing this podcast, because again, I am familiar with you. My wife follows you. So it's like, for me, it's allowing people to understand exactly what you said, that we're in these physical bodies, even though that's not what we are at our divine essence, but knowing what we are as energy and frequency, it's a lot better if these physical bodies can do, what we ask them to do when we need them to do it, so it's like a lot easier to live our life, at least in the matrix, as I call third density experience, with a healthy body. Right. And obviously, depending on what happens to us in life, and we can't ever count on getting, hit by a car walking outside of our home, or, a plane crashing into our house or whatever, you can't account for like strange acts of God or nature, however you view the world. But it's definitely a lot easier, in my opinion, to work on our physical body optimization. And again, to what you were saying, like, it's not about having a six pack or looking amazing in a bikini at any age. It's literally about having the functional strength and the cognitive ability to be able to pick up your grandkids in your 60s, 70s, and 80s, to hike a mountain in your mid 70s. And again, just to have energy so that you have vitality and wellness long into whatever age you live. And I push for people to strive to reach, 90, 100 years old. There's no reason you can't. I mean, we could actually live a lot longer, but to me, it's more about the quality of our life versus the quantity of our life.
Absolutely. Because the reality is that most of us, I think, actually from a very young age, if I look at all my clients, they all tell me from the age of teenager, I did not feel good in my body.
Mm-hmm.
And that
Right.
was my experience as well. And I
Yeah.
kept thinking, okay, what is this life about? Like, if
Mm-hmm.
life is not enjoyable in a body,
Right.
what is the purpose of being around? Of course, I'm going to be depressed. Of course, I'm going to be, not someone who actually can even contribute to society.
Mm-hmm.
Because if I'm running on empty, if I'm unexcited and uninspired about life, I'm just going to be a little worker bee, right? And that's
Mm-hmm.
what the reality that most people experience. So yes, in terms of consciousness, well, let's maybe start there, because again, I come from, the world where I did a ton of fasting. I was
Sure.
fasting on fruit for many years, or mostly fruit. And, I really kind of became this, well, I felt like I was a walking Buddha for several years, or a mix between a walking Buddha and a fairy.
Sure.
And I thought that I was living, my purest life, until I hit perimenopause. And I think also my genetics kind of, bumped up against the
Mm-hmm.
reality of life. And it was like, okay, now you're depleted
Right.
and you are weakened to a point where your body cannot regenerate itself.
Right.
So I kind of took myself to the edge, and I learned a lot in the process. And yes, I also cleansed my body at a deepest level, but then I needed to regenerate. And that's where, for me, peptide bioregulators came in and completely changed my reality.
That's
Because all of
awesome.
a sudden, it was as if I was given a new foundation to put roots in.
I'd like to talk or unpack a little bit about what you said, because I'm very into fasting. I've written 3 books on fasting, so I know all the science behind fasting. And I'm obviously a faster. I fast every other day, every day of my life, and I've been doing that now for 7 years. Um, the spiritual aspect of like walking around being a fairy, I like that. An elemental. And having that energy. The problem that you face and that you had to end up dealing with, and the ultimate reality, is that the evolutionary biology of life in a body is that for most of us, like you're Northern European, I'm Northern European, like we have developed our physical beings have developed on animal protein. And so we have this thousands of years of, again, evolutionary biology in our DNA, in our, ancestry, and going against that, which you did, which spiritually is cool. Like I'm totally, I have nothing against people who are vegans or fruitarians or vegetarians or any of that stuff. Like if you're doing it for a spiritual purpose and you're intelligent in how you do it. And what I mean by intelligent in how you do it is obviously you're getting enough protein, right? You're getting enough essential vitamins and minerals and amino acids and all those different things. I think it's amazing, but as you know, 95% of people that do it wrong. Yeah. But to your point, back to what you were saying is like divinely what you were doing is inspiring and possible, but the physical, resistance that you eventually ran into, which you talked about already, is inevitable. I see it in so many people, whether it's perimenopause, premenopause, 35 to 40. I mean, as you know, we have to mention it. The planet, especially in the West, is completely contaminated now. The food, the air, the water, everything is contaminated. There's no way to avoid it. That's, half of the stuff I talk about on a day-in-day basis to people, because you can't realistically say, oh, I'm holistic and natural. Because if you're holistic and natural and you're not living at the top of a mountain somewhere, you're done, right? Because you're being invaded, and the toxic load is so insane at this point, Alex. I mean, I don't even know how to even overcome it other than just talking about peptides and hormonal optimization and the stuff that we'll probably talk about. But that's what, for your audience, that's what happened to you, is that you ran into the evolutionary biological, resistance / wall that our parents and our ancestors created for us by eating meat. And so not having that protein, and I say meat, it's kind of animal-based protein, but it could have been pea-based protein. It's essentially protein. You were eating nothing but fruit. Yeah. And your body can't manufacture protein from fruit. The body can manufacture, as you know, glucose from protein. But by not eating all that protein, you ran into all the things that you ran into. But again, I don't fault you for doing it spiritually, because I think it's an amazing choice to do that. And obviously, from where we emanate or where we're originally from, we weren't eating anything. I mean, we were energetic beings, right?
Absolutely. No, and it was an amazing, like, I don't go as many others do, oh, let's blame the fruit and let's blame, veganism. No, it was an amazing journey. Of course. And at the same time, it came to a point where I realized now it's time to make a switch, because otherwise I was simply going to hold on to dogma at the cost of my own body. And the irony, to talk about toxins, we were living in South Africa when I was doing kind of fruitarianism and fasting and all of that, where nature still probably, I would say, it's one of the places on the planet that is more natural and less polluted. Right. And then we had this fantasy just before 2020 and the whole, show. We decided to move to Bali, and with this fantasy of like, okay, great, we're going to live in Bali, we're going to live an even more fruitarian lifestyle, etc. And the irony was that 6 months into being here in Bali, which is, as magnificent as it is, it's a toxic paradise. There's probably few other places on the planet that are as toxic as Bali. Right. And within 6 months, my body just completely crashed. Right. And it didn't want any more fruit. It was like, I'm done. And I kind of, the irony wasn't lost on me, because here Alex wanted to go even higher into, spiritual realms. And Bali was like, no, sister, you are going to come down into reality. And you're going to learn about what does it mean to be in a body. And to me, being in a body, it means actually coming to face the reality of all the dimensions that are here, right? That it's not just, the fifth, sixth, and 12th dimension, but it's like, we live in duality.
Yes, exactly.
And I think that's the hardest thing for us humans to kind of make peace with, right? But we have to. So I think this is where I'm finding a lot of teachings from you biohackers to go, we got to be real, right? we're living in this toxic soup.
Yes.
And not just from an environmental perspective, but as we know, the predominant consciousness that rules the planet,
Is
I
dark.
mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's scary.
Chaos. Yeah.
Absolute scary.
Yeah. Well, to all of that, yes, we're in total agreement. I like to tell my people, obviously I talk about all the things I talk about from a health optimization standpoint, but I always, when I get down to the nitty gritty, it's always about, do you understand that you are here in a third density physical body? You consented to be here, right? So this is a shit show. It's toxic. There's a toxic load pretty much everywhere in the world now. And it is very difficult to stay in a raised consciousness or elevated frequency, but you ultimately consented to be here. So if you ultimately consented to be here, then again, what is your primary purpose? And your primary purpose is to choose literally whether you're going to serve others or serve self. And I think in this experience, obviously, as we age, I think you already said it, we go like this. There's times where we serve self and there's times where we serve others, but you have to get to a place ultimately, if you want to graduate, right? Because I like to say Earth and third density is a school for souls. If you want to graduate, you have to be able to serve others, because actually in the raw teachings, you can graduate to fourth density service to self, but that's literally like going to hell. In fact, that's where the beings that govern this realm now are based, right? That's why we can't ever see what's really going on, because they're the puppets behind the curtain or the veil. But that's where they go. So it's like, if you're really, truly evil and you're eating kids and drinking adrenochrome and doing all these things that they talk, that the elites talk about that is obviously happening, then that's probably where you go. But if you don't want to be that person and you want to be like you or me and you want to live in a raised frequency, you have to serve others. And you can do that through your work, through your creation. Obviously, if you're a painter, you're an artist. I mean, even if you're just a ditch digger, if you do it in the purpose of like serving other people, then you're probably going to get out of here at some point. But that's, like you said, it's probably more difficult now since 2020 because of what they did to so many people. I mean, they intimidated at least 70% of the world into taking a, whatever you want to call it, that was basically some sort of genetic programming or virus modulation or whatever it is that they injected into people. And thankfully, not every one of those batches was like a kill batch, right? We all know people that have died within a week of getting it, or indirectly know people. But for the most part, they were giving people like some sort of genetic program that was going to run, at some future time, based on the way, like you were just saying, what they want, which is, authoritarianism, tyranny, transhumanism. I mean, basically, I think, Alex, the best way to say it for everybody, is, including your and my audience, is that they want to create human robots. They don't want us divine, organic, sovereign, empowered, and free. They want us to be part of the cloud. That's literally where it's all going. And so I can envision, obviously we're talking truth right now, but I can envision two parallel realities. People like us who will not be connected to that. And then people like them who will be living in these, instant 15-minute cities, they call them, they're Borg. They're literally connected to the cloud. They don't exercise. They don't eat well. They're living in a virtual fantasy reality, and they don't care. They're, if you saw them, it would be like the movie The Matrix, right? Where they're all hooked up to the machines and they're just like barely alive. Like, I can actually see third density reality going to that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think to people like you and I, it kind of seems completely like, why would you ever want that? But, right, I mean, it makes zero sense. And yet, when we look at the reality that is running, we have to see that is what's happening.
Yes.
So in terms of, those people, because I feel there's a lot of people that are kind of like, they've woken up, but they're still on the verge. Like there's still fear.
Yeah.
And, I mean, can we blame them? There's more confusion than ever before.
No.
In order to get truth, when I look at how much effort and time and investments I had to make to get truth, it's consumed my freaking life, right?
Yeah.
And it shouldn't be that. It shouldn't be that. But that is what it is right now. So for those people, how can we kind of introduce them to the conversation of peptides, because I still think a lot of people don't understand peptides, that peptides are completely natural in terms of we produce peptides all day long in our bodies.
Exactly.
However, due to the genetic modifications, due to the toxicity, due to everything, and the consciousness tyranny.
That's right.
Right? Because what the Russians teach about peptide bioregulators and why they're so crucial is that the number one stressor for our body is actually the tyranny of consciousness.
That's right.
Because it affects our hypothalamus. And once our hypothalamus has been affected, it trickles down into the rest of the system and the endocrine system starts breaking down.
That's right.
So we can do all the detoxes in the world. We can do all the things. We can, nutrify ourselves. But as long as our endocrine system is broken down, our body can't regenerate itself. And that's where, to me, peptides, like if we're not doing peptides, what are we doing?
So this is an awesome podcast. We're going in a lot of really good directions here. My business partner, Hunter Williams, which you've seen because you're on my email list, he's a very smart young guy. He's mentored under me for about 7 years now, but he's about to release a book called Testosterone, the God Molecule. And it's literally a book written for normies because, as you know, 80 to 85% of the global population right now does not know exactly what you just said. That because of the environmental load of toxicity, they are suffering from a hormonal deficiency, a hormonal imbalance. Men and women, it's equal. It's across the globe. It's everywhere. I'm blown away every single day, Alex, that like people who are connected to me, through various circles and teachings and followers and audiences and stuff like that will send me emails. I mean, I get at least 10, 15 of a day. And it's like, I was turned on to you by so-and-so and I never believed anything you said. And then all of a sudden I finally decided my wife, it's a lot of times it's men who cannot get an erection because they have low testosterone and their wives will like force them to get their testosterone measured because they think they're cheating on them because they won't have sex with them because they can't get an erection. And they'll be like, and here's my testosterone scores. And my testosterone was 0 or my free testosterone was 2. Or I mean, it's endless. And it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter whether you're a 25 or 30-year-old male or female. It doesn't matter whether you're a 65-year-old man or woman. Everyone in the modern world today who's not optimizing either via hormones or peptides is deficient. It's literally that simple. It's not a question of some people can stay naturally optimized because you can't. You're lying to yourself. I have these conversations day in and day out with very intelligent people who are very successful in the world. And I say to them, go get your testosterone measured. Go get your estradiol measured. Go get your progesterone level measured. I say the same thing to men and women. And the ones that actually do it, because a lot of them are afraid to do it. They don't know what to do. As you know, the system is designed to not get it measured. The average garden variety PPO or HMO doctor or any insurance doctor or socialized medicine doctor, overseas is just going to say, you don't need to get your hormones. Why would you want to get your hormones measured? Who cares? Here. Oh, you're depressed. Here's take this SRI or take this, pink or blue pill for your erectile dysfunction. They do it for women now too. They give women Filobaron's written. It's the same thing. So they never address the root cause, which you just talked about, which is the endocrine system crashed. The endocrine systems of almost every person on this planet today that's an adult, and even kids. I mean, I don't want to go down, that's another rabbit hole. But most adult male and females on this planet in the West today have totally crashed endocrine systems. And as you know, there's no hope unless they follow people like you or me, because the medical system is not addressing this. Zero. There's none. You cannot go to any managed care, garden variety, family care practitioner anywhere on the planet and expect them to be able to evaluate for you for hormonal deficiency. It's not possible. So the internet, thank God, exists. And some people, lucky enough, find people like you and I, and we tell them this. And then it begins where they get measured, and then they're like, oh, now what do I do? Right? And thank God we do have peptides. And thank God we do have some doctors and functional healthcare providers and NPs and PAs and all these different people now that are out there like, hey, we can optimize your hormones. We can give you these peptide, that peptide. But as you know, you already said it, the tyranny, it's weird, right? Because now even the medical system is being cut and shunned and attacked for peptides. As you know, last year the FDA classified 26 of the best peptides that we all know and love and said, oh, these are unsafe, not for human consumption. Meanwhile, or use. And then, meanwhile, they're making, no exaggeration when I say this, hundreds of billions of dollars selling GLP-1 peptides, as you said at the very beginning of the show, in high dosages, overdosing people, making a fortune, not caring for their health, and then ultimately never teaching the patient how to actually use the product. So all of these people use these amazing peptides like Ozempic and Mounjaro, and there's many more of them that are coming that are even better, but they use them completely wrong. They take way too high of a dose. They don't eat enough protein. They don't exercise. They don't change their shitty lifestyle. They're already flaming dumpster fires who eat too much sugar, drink too much alcohol, don't exercise, right? So it's like they think they're magic potions or pills or injections. And as you know, the hardest part to tell people about this is when they first start doing it. Again, I'm talking about GLP-1 peptides. They stop eating and they lose weight. And they think, oh my God, this is a miracle. And then 3 weeks later, they've eaten 3 times in 3 weeks. And now they've destroyed their thyroid function. They've destroyed their metabolism. They end up with all these things that we hear about in the news, Wegovy face or Wegovy neck or Wegovy butt or all this nonsense. And then all the top, medical professionals out there who glom on to the negative news and the propaganda. And then they go out and they tell people that they're bad for you. It's the most insane, just inept web of debauchery that I've ever seen. It's like, it makes it hard for me because obviously, that I'm an expert when it comes to peptides, talking to other intelligent people, because all they know is what they've read in the mainstream, which is all nonsense. It's just crazy. But, to go back to something I want to let you start, but I want to say something to what you addressed because it was brilliant. But we really do have to start with people who don't know anything about peptides. And I really do want to go down that path and talk about like how we can introduce these to people that don't. But we really do have to start with what you said. And this is where everyone makes a mistake in the peptide world right now. You cannot start peptides if you really want them to be successful in using them, unless you understand if you do have a hormonal deficiency and you address that first.
Yeah.
Because I see all these people that want to take all these shiny new peptides that do all these great things, increase cognition, improve skin, all these things, men and women. And it's like, dude, are you hormonally optimized, or are you working to get hormonally optimized first? Because if you're not, as I always say, it's a symphony right here, right now. The biological symptoms are one giant symphony. If your hormones, endocrine system is not functioning properly, you're not going to get much out of peptides.
Absolutely.
So let's address the root cause of our hormonal deficiency first, and then we introduce peptides. But I see it just time and time again. I see so many people that get so excited. They want to stack this peptide and that peptide and this peptide and peptide. And you're like, well, wait a minute. What about your hormones? How's your estradiol? You're a perimenopausal woman. What about your testosterone? And they're like, well, what does that matter? And it's like, no.
Yeah. And in some ways, one of the main glands that no one speaks about is the hypothalamus.
Yes.
And the hypothalamus being the master gland for literally everything that happens downstream.
Yep.
And that's what I love about the teachings of the Russians. They're all about, we need to start with the peptide for the pineal gland and hypothalamus gland.
Totally.
Because once that is back on fire again,
you can get everything else going. Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And I think because people, or sort of mainstream doctors and media and so forth, they're all about fat loss. They're all about, organs and detox, basically everything that happens downstream.
Yes.
So we don't really look at, what actually directs things. And what I find interesting, and the Russians talk about this, in fact, Professor Kavinson, I can't remember, which video I watched, and I wish I would have a clip of that. But I remember watching a video of his where his words were, if everyone's pineal gland and hypothalamus gland would be optimized, we would live in a completely different reality.
We would live to 250 years on average.
That too, but he made the point of we would live in a different consciousness.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So the reality is that what's going on out there and all the fear that people are giving into, when you are in fear, that's when you know your hypothalamus and pineal gland ain't working.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Because how could we be living in fear if we are connected?
That's right.
To the true reality, right? So I mean that's where to me it gets really interesting. It's like we are made to be made in the image of God and to live in the image of God, but our legs, in Italian we say, our legs are cut at birth.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So that's the evil sort of. Sometimes I even think, is it a plan? Because I really actually struggle to kind of contemplate the fact that there is a plan, or is it just pure ignorance? And is it just that we're living in such radical duality that ignorance is the evil? Sometimes I think, is there a plan of them, like what we call them? Is there a plan?
I think so it's a great question, and a lot could be unpacked and to talk about. I think from a top-down level, there's a plan of negativity, right? And the plan of negativity is those, let's just call them the parasite class. And again, we're not taught, the rulers of this density aren't in this density. They have minions, elites, rich, whoever you want to call them. People talk about George Soros and Bill Gates and all these people. They're not even the real rulers, right? There's like actually people that are above them. They're just the people in the news, right? But that class of people is definitely ruled from beyond the veil. And there's a million names for them. People call them the Anunnaki, the fallen angels, the reptilians. There's so many different names for these fourth density beings. But in that class of existence, you are physical in that level, but etheric if you would come into our density. And that's why you can't see them when they're here. They literally have the ability. I mean, again, I forget the author that wrote a book about the densities of existence or the dimensions of existence. And a fourth density being would be like a god to a third density being like us. So it's like, if you think about the past and the giant, the geodetic of, stone monuments that are all over the planet, like in Machu Picchu and Göbekli Tepe and all these places where they have these massive, stone edifices, like clearly they were designed and built by a species or an intelligence that was most likely fourth density. And again, at that time, they were able to come into our third density reality for whatever reasons. Maybe it was due to gravity. Maybe it was the sun's intensity was lesser or stronger. I mean, it doesn't matter. People speculate, but the truth is there's a dark contingent in fourth density that has taken ownership of, quote unquote, the control structure, call it the matrix, of third density. But the ignorance to what you talk about is absolutely part of what they've created, because they don't want us to be not separated, which is what you said. Like when we awaken, we realize that our higher self is our connection to divinity within us, and we're not separate. So there's nothing to fear, right? Because you understand that you are a divine being, and at base essence, you are of spiritual energy. You're not this physical body. You're not, quote unquote, body conscious, right? Yes, you have a body and you're alive in third density, and that body will die, and your spirit will travel on to its next journey. You'll go to the zone of contemplation and have a life review and then do it again, or if, go somewhere else, maybe you come back here, probably come back here. But the truth is that there's definitely a negative force, but they don't control you unless you allow them to control you. And you are controlled if you are vibrating in red.
Yeah.
Right? If you're in root chakra, service to self, victim to your own, self, it's not my fault. I have a young daughter, she's 14, and we're constantly dealing with victimhood because, as you know, social media today That's all. That's the only frequency in social media. It literally teaches people that they're not responsible. They don't have to be accountable. That, that it's somebody else's fault, the external savior, the external judger, the external whatever, it's their fault. Yeah. I don't have to take responsibility. I mean, it's insane. I mean, because you and I grew up in a totally different world, but nowadays with technology, they've been able to hijack the conscious thoughts of young people to teach them that it's not their problem. It's not their fault. As you know, that a lot of them think that socialism is the answer. I mean, it's insane, the brainwashing that has just happened in the last 10 to 15 years with technology, right? With the screens, the screens, as you know, I always tell this too, the screens talk to you, they don't have to study. They can ask the screen for the answer, and then the screen lies to them. I mean, think about that. I mean, it literally lies to them. So they don't even know, they've never researched anything. Everything is accessible from a phone or from a tablet or from a desktop. They don't have to go to the library. They don't have to pull out a book. They don't have to use the Dewey Decimal System, the stuff that you and I had to do when we were growing up if we ever wanted to learn anything. So the world has shifted. And again, the quote unquote, the dark side, the AI, whatever you want to call it now, controls the narrative. So the only way that you can escape the narrative is by creating your own narrative. And I like to say that in today's world, you have two choices. You can create and be of this world. Create and be in this world, or you can consume and be of this world. And most people consume. They create nothing. They go from internet to porn to video games to television, and that's their existence. And then they, as you said, they clock into their cubicle and they're just, like you said, good employees, do my job, ask for vacation, ask to go take a piss. I mean, it's insane. But this is most people's life until they choose that they're going to become accountable and personally responsible, and they're not going to be ordered around, and they're not going to live in fear. And, like you said, going back to what, Dr. Cavinson said, God, may he rest in peace, because he died in December, and now his son is in charge of the empire, and that's a whole nother story. But it's crazy to think how they hijacked the amygdala and they hijacked the you said it right, the pineal hypothalamus. They hijacked the pineal during COVID. That was the main goal, was to literally put people in a state of complete fear, to put them in a state of paralysis. And I know you see this, but whenever you go out in public now and you see people still wearing masks, those are the people who have literally no ability to control up there. It's completely gone. Through all the fear of the television and the internet and the screen and everything else, they literally are unable to critically think and discern, because we all know now that the mask actually does worse. By wearing a mask, you're breathing, and it's hypoxic. I mean, again, there's so much science out there proving that masks do nothing but make you worse. And yet there are literally millions of people walking this planet right now still wearing masks, because, again, as you very intelligently said, their amygdala and their pineal is completely hijacked.
Absolutely.
It's insane. Yeah. I mean, but you have to have compassion for them. Like it used to be, we all were like, get out of my way, or please, you're not there. But it's like, you have to look at them and you have to really have eyes of compassion for them, because they are absolutely hijacked. Their souls and their brain are in pure fear.
Mm-hmm. And I suppose when you are in that level of fear, ultimately, I mean, what can you do? Because you're not even going to be open to peptides. You're not even going to be open to, in some ways, I would say my introduction to consciousness. And sometimes I think, how was I guided there? I don't know, by the grace of God, were psychedelics.
Yeah, of course.
That for me was really the door openers to then go, hang on a moment.
Yeah.
We're living in Twilight Zone.
The psychedelics and theogens, if we want to talk about like plant medicine or, anything that will get your brain to escape the entrainment of third density, the mind control programming of do this, work this way, stay in the same 5 mile areas your whole life. Again, as most people, that's to me the great gateway to the cosmos. As soon as you do that, you realize that most of what we've learned, most of what they teach, it's BS. It's complete BS. But you're right. I mean, there's so many people who refuse to do those things. And obviously now, since 2020 and 2021, with the great, I call it the great spiritual test. Now people are basically, you're either on one side where you're awake and you understand what's going on, or you're completely closed off in fear and you have no, like you just said, there's really, honestly, Alex, no chance, in my opinion, for those people to make it. And when I say make it, like, hopefully, we're getting to a place where there will be separate realities and there will be some form of, blip or ascension or wave or something where it's like there'll be a separate earth, a new earth, whatever. But like, you're right. What you said, like, those people are so wrapped into fear that there's nothing that someone like you and I could even do to teach them a better way, to teach them to awaken. I mean, it's like I said on my private show on last night, it's Tuesday night, to my audience, which, I get 50 or 60 people watching live. I said, you guys watching this show right now, being in this group right now, being where you're at right now, are on my frequency. You're at my conscious frequency. So this doesn't bother you, but like, the lines are firmly drawn now. There's, the crossing over is not going to happen. Yes, there are people slowly coming out of their coma, but you're either here or you're there. The middle ground, I think there's a few, and maybe some of them have a chance to get on this side. But for the most part, most people are stuck where they're going to be. And obviously they're just going to deal with whatever they're going to deal with. And we all feel, and I don't want to rabbit hole, but I think we all feel that something massive is coming.
Yeah.
Right. To this planet. Like, we don't know what it'll be, but it's got to be something that shakes humanity to its core foundationally, so that those that are still in the middle make a choice.
Yeah. As if we need more, right? I'm kind of going like, okay, do we really need more of a wake up, but
right.
Whatever.
Well, there's plenty of people out there that do. That's what's so insane. I mean, I really do think that it will, if you look at it from an existential standpoint, it really will serve the people that are in the middle, still straddling the fence. Like, it'll either be use it or lose it. Like, they'll have to awaken or they'll never awaken. That's kind of the way I look at it.
I'm in the light, Jay. I'm in the light.
Well, it's okay. Yeah, it's okay. It's beautiful. Yeah, you look beautiful. It's angelic now.
So let's bring it back to, okay, so people who are going, I am ready to take the big step. I'm going to venture out into the wild west of peptides.
Yep.
Where is a good place for them to start? And of course, I mean, it kind of, well, we think it goes without saying, but actually we do need to say it. When you work with peptides, always seek out people who actually have been working with peptides for several years, please, and who know what they are doing. And I would say anyone who tells you just go take a peptide and, see you later, do not trust, such person.
Yeah.
Because peptides, no matter how small dosages or how few you're taking, you want to take them in the context of a comprehensive program, because otherwise you're going to be disappointed, right?
Yes.
You're going to be disappointed, and then you're going to think peptides don't work. And as you said, things like Ozempic and all of the pharmaceuticals, they're actually giving peptides a bad name. Totally.
Yeah.
And that's a tragedy.
Well, so that's a really good setup. So the first, to wrap it or to go backwards a little bit from what you said, because it's a big origin story, but we're on the verge right now of a bunch of oral peptides, which have not been in the marketplace yet, coming into the market because the technology for oral efficacy and oral availability is improving dramatically. So we're getting to a place where, like, a lot of people who have not taken the peptide leap yet, and as you know this, a lot of people are obviously needle phobic. They don't want to inject themselves. They're afraid of needles. They don't really understand that it's just a microscopic, tiny little hypodermic needle that you could stab yourself 1,000 times for and not even feel the pain. A mosquito bite's way worse. It's like I
Yeah.
always tell people this, like the simplest way to understanding how to inject yourself is by just taking an injection and then doing it over again. It becomes like brushing your teeth, right? You do it every day, you do it every night. Yeah. So it's not a big deal, but for the people that haven't crossed over yet and they're like injections, needles, whoa, no, there's going to be a massive like surge of oral bioavailability and oral efficacy peptides. And we're really, really close. And I know this because I'm involved in it. Like, you know, I had a couple of meetings today talking with some of the biggest people in the world who are bringing the oral available peptides to marketplace. But so I'm telling that to, you know, you right now, because again, a lot of people watching this are like, I can't do it. I cannot inject myself. There's just no way, you know, the fear or just the thought process of like, what would my doctor say? Or, you know, how can I do this? But the truth is, to what you said about the pharmaceutical versions of peptides, which again, so many people are familiar with GLPs now because they're so big in the news. I teach that there is another way and that you don't have to rely on the physicians, right? You can purchase your peptides from what are called research chemical companies. Now, this is a very gray world and gray market because these companies basically have a license to manufacture human grade raw material products for research purposes. So it's silly because they don't have a medical license and they're not supposed to be able to just directly sell these peptides to people. Because the pharmaceutical, obviously the compound pharmacies and the pharmaceutical manufacturers are that middle ground. But in the last 6 years, you know, it's really started about 2 years before the scamdemic happened. But obviously since the scamdemic, it's blown up because so many people, as you know, are looking for alternative forms of healing because they've been injured from the V. So it's like this really weird world where everybody is getting into the peptide world now. There's so many manufacturers of research-based peptides now that it's almost like if you're not an expert or pretty knowledgeable in the field, you don't even know where to get them from. Because like, how do you know who to trust? There's so, I mean, every day my, you know, WhatsApp and my Facebook and my Instagram messages are full of people asking me, you know, to consult for them, or, you know, I want to build this business, or I want to get into peptides. I need your help, blah, blah, blah. It's crazy how many people are trying to get into this space because it's so massive right now. But to what you said, and this is important, if you're a person, a lay person who's never used peptides and you want to use peptides, you have to pick somebody who can help you. And you said it exactly right. You cannot work with somebody who literally is in fly-by-night person, a fly-by-night doctor, a person who just got their functional medicine license 3 weeks ago and has never been with peptides. You have to choose someone who's been using peptides for a long time. And obviously, like you said, there's plenty of biohackers. There's plenty of people in the functional medicine space and in the health and wellness space that have been involved in peptides. So just do your research and do your homework and make sure that if you are going to work with somebody in that space, again, whether it's a doctor or an expert, that they actually do walk the walk and talk the talk and are truly, literally living the lifestyle that they espouse. So that's number one. That's rule number one. And then rule number two is you have to decide as an individual, as a sovereign, empowered, free individual, whether you want to learn to do this on your own or you want the confines and the comfort and convenience of working with a physician. And the differences are very simply this. If you work with a physician, the benefits are they're going to reconstitute your peptide. They're going to send you how to inject in the exact instructions. Usually, you know, sometimes they'll even pre-fill your syringes, which I don't recommend, but some of them do. But you're going to pay somewhere between, no exaggeration, 8 to 20 times the cost that you would if you decide that you want to do these yourself. Now, if you do want to do them yourself, obviously the benefits are it's way cheaper. Yeah. But the negatives, and I don't think they're negatives initially, you have to learn to do it. You have to learn to reconstitute. You have to learn milligrams versus micrograms. You have to become familiar with reconstituting a peptide, you know, a powder lyophilized based peptide with reconstitution or injection water. You have to be familiar with like peptide calculators, which there's so many now for free. I have one on my website, but there's a million of them out there now. And you have to learn to do basic math.
Yes.
And peptide math is not easy. I mean, like, you know, I tell people this all the time. I mean, I've literally now been using peptides close to 21 years. It'll be 21 years in January. And there's sometimes where like I still have to like do a little bit of math. You know, if somebody sends me a 10 milligram vial of this with 2 peptides in it, and each peptide is a different milligram dosage in a 10 milligram vial, I got to do a little bit of math. So if you are going to get into peptides, realize that there is a learning curve. Okay. And I tell people, Alex, and again, this is just personally my opinion, but I tell people in the world that we're living in right now, why would you want to be reliant on a doctor?
100%.
The system could go down tomorrow and all your peptides go down with it versus being independent, again, empowered, sovereign, and free, and purchasing them directly from a research chemical company. Now you're completely empowered. You understand how to use them. You know how to mix them. You know how to stack them. You know how to dose them correctly. So, but these are all things that every individual, and I never judge anyone based on it. Like, it's based on your unique comfort level. Some people are like, no, dude, my job is very cognitively demanding already, and I don't want to think about that shit. I want to use them. You know, I know they're beneficial, and I want to just be told by my doctor, and I'm glad to pay 10 times the cost, you know? And for those people, cool. But just realize if the medical system goes down, you're screwed. And for the other people, you know, you got to do a little homework. You got to do a little research. You got to pay attention, watch people like me, you know, watch people like you, read books, watch videos, educate yourself. And again, I mean, and I know you know this, but like knowledge is power. And the more knowledge you have, the more apt you're going to be in learning to use therapeutic peptides quickly, efficiently, and successfully. And I see way too many people, because I've worked with, thousands at this point now, who rely on doctors. And then this happens all the time. I mean, this is a very commonplace occurrence now. The doctor they're working can't get their peptides anymore because the compound pharmacy that they have a relationship with shuts down.
Mm-hmm.
And so the doctor sends them an email and says, oh, tough luck. Can't get your peptides anymore. Go find somebody else. And now they're like, oh my God, what am I going to do? Versus you and me, and we know how to use them. And that never happens. If the research company gets shut down, we go to the next one. So you have to make a choice. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, I find in today's world, and this was also really the message, very firm message that I received 10 years ago. If you are not your own doctor,
right? Exactly.
If you don't know your own body, if you don't know all the possibilities that are out there, you
You're
are
doomed.
powerless.
You're doomed. You're absolutely doomed. I have the same statement. I say you have to become the proactive scientist of your own health. There's 100%. No option. There's no option.
100%. Because at the end of the day, what do we have other than our health and vitality
Yes.
and our cognitive function, right? Like if we don't have that, then no matter how much money we have, no matter how, much power or whatever. So definitely I do encourage people, and that's one of my big things, educate yourself and become fearless in the pursuit of your own health.
Yes.
So I find, that to me is number one. And like you said, we never know, when peptides are taken away from doctors. So what would you say are, in fact, before we kind of go into, the basic peptides, which at the end of the day, the basic peptides, which pretty much anyone, by now has heard of, whether it's your BPC 157, your TB 500, thymosin alpha 1, etc. Those are things that I think, everyone should be on, right?
100%. Yeah. I mean, I'll tell you an amazing story. Billy Carson, I know you know Billy Carson. So his wife called me today. He almost just died. He was on location shooting somewhere in Turkey for a video they're doing on some ancient structures. And they stayed in a hotel that was, they don't know this for a fact, but they'll find out, that they think had mold poisoning. And he got so sick. And he literally was just let out of the hospital today. But I've been like working with them on their peptide stack and all this stuff. But she was like, dude, if we didn't have these peptides, I don't know what would have happened. And nobody knows about this because I just found out about this today. It's crazy. I mean, I literally was just on their podcast like 5 weeks ago, and they left like 10 days later to go over there. But I mean, like he had to be rushed to a hospital, and then he was flown over here. He was in a hospital in Fort Lauderdale. They live in Fort Lauderdale, actually Boca Raton, Florida. But crazy story, but the truth is thankfully they had peptides. Because as you know, conventional medicine's not giving people peptides. If you get stuck in a medical, emergency, a medical crisis or emergency, something like that, they're not going to give you VIP or TA1 or TB500 or BPC or any of these things, LL37, all these amazing, life-changing, life-enhancing, life-saving peptides. They're not going to give you those. There's no scientific studies. We can't give you these. I mean, it's completely insane. But yes, like I tell people this all the time, like I don't go anywhere, and I travel a lot these days without BPC 157 and TB 500 in a multi-dose file together. Thymosin alpha 1, which is obviously the immunomodulator, the most powerful immunity enhancing peptide. And by the way, Billy was taking that. So, I mean, imagine, what kind of stuff they breathed in this hotel, but like, it's just with peptides. So again, so the audience understands, you're always treating the fundamental root cause of what ails you versus, allopathic Rockefeller petroleum distillate meds, which you're taking. And when they get into your system, they're literally breaking down and causing side effects to your other biological systems. So again, most people are taking all these different medications and various medications to undo the damaging effects and side effects of the other medications. Whereas with peptides, as you said in the very early part of this show, they're basically organic biomolecules that we naturally produce. And the likelihood that you can get negative side effects is almost nil. Like a side effect from injecting a peptide is like a rash.
Yeah.
Right. Or maybe, if your body develops like a weird, like antihistamine or histological response, you might get like nausea for 10 minutes or 6 minutes. And it's not nausea where you're bent over vomiting. It's just nausea where you don't feel very good. Right. But like, other than that, I don't even think you could even get any other side effects. I've known people that have just completely misdosed an entire vial and they're like, oh my God, what's going to happen to me? I'm like, nothing. You'll wake up tomorrow morning just like today. But that's the thing is like the side effects from peptides are so minimal. So it's like, if you're watching this and you haven't crossed over yet, just know that the risk is so minimal. Like even if you screw up the injection or you overdose or you underdose, you're not going to be in like harm's way. It's just, that's just how they work. Like there's very, very little side effects. And I don't want you to think that there might not be side effects for your individual person. Because as you know, as you said, you don't want to be in fear of what you're doing because obviously your mind can create a reaction. If you're totally afraid of injecting a peptide, you might manifest some sort of like weird psychogenic reaction to it. But I've been injecting peptides for almost 21 years. And I've worked with literally thousands and via online, hundreds of thousands of people. And I've rarely seen anyone have a serious reaction or side effect to a peptide. And obviously what I have seen is profound, tremendous, life-saving, life-changing, life-altering results from almost every peptide, again, when used correctly. And, as I always say, in the context of longevity.
Absolutely. So I want to briefly talk about, just because I've heard you talk about Melanotan-1, I think it is, that the effects on consciousness.
Yes.
So since, we've talked about consciousness, Melanotan-1, I have not yet tried it, but I'm about to order some.
Awesome.
So, in some ways, purely because of what you said in terms of, consciousness effect. And so let's maybe briefly touch upon that before we maybe close off with a discussion around the GLP-1s, because
Sure.
I think it's very necessary.
Yeah, for sure. So Melanotan-1 is my favorite peptide. Well, I mean, it's probably, we'll get into GLPs, we'll get into Retatrutide, but it's between those two peptides. So I've been using Melanotan-1 since 2008. I was using it in 2008 to 2012 because I was competing in male physique shows and I was using it to tan. So obviously it does give a benefit of tanning the skin. In fact, my skin has permanently changed 2 or 3 shades darker since I started using Melanotan-1. And again, this is all really good, right? Because as you know, So let's explain what it is. So Melanotan-1 is a melanin corticoid receptor complex peptide. And what that means is it actually is able to enhance melanin production in your body. And for people that don't know what melanin is, but melanin is basically a protein hormone that allows your skin to darken in various shades of the sun. And your melanin is basically genetic. The closer you are to the equatorial pole, as far as your ancestry and inheritance, the darker your skin will be, right? So like African people, Indian people, South African people, Southern Mexican or South American people are darker skinned naturally because they're closer to the equatorial pole. Versus people like you and me, we're whiter. We're more Northern European in ancestry. And again, I know people always will say this to me, but Jay, that's hundreds of thousands of years of evolution. We've all mixed genetically, and the gene pool is very diverse. And it's totally true, but it still separates by that. So when you inject Melanotan-1, you're going to get especially if you're in the sun, and I hope you're in the sun because the sun is important, but again, regulate your sun exposure, but hopefully you get in the sun every day for 20 to 30 minutes. But you will get a darker shade of skin. Mm-hmm. And the effect that I started to realize, like once I started getting into the research about melanin corticoid receptor complexes, and again, I could go so deep on this because my book, the Testosterone Optimization Therapy Bible, I wrote a whole chapter on Melanotan-1, and I started getting into the research back in 2015 and 2016, and it blew my mind. There was actually a man whose name was Frank Barr. Now, if you look, this is another example of the dark side hijacking history. If you try to Google this guy, you're not going to find any information. They've literally deleted his information off of Twitter, and I mean, not Twitter, off of Google. So the search engines, if you're a real dork technologically, you can go back and use the Wayback Machine and you'll still find stuff. But most people, if you just do a general Boolean Google search right now for Frank Barr, invisible. But Frank Barr was like the father of studying melanin. And no lie, in 1971, which was ironically the year that I was born, he was suicided off a building at the top in San Francisco in Berkeley. I mean, he literally jumped off the top of a building, and he was like a famous melanin researcher. So he was clearly suicided because of his research. He tapped into some things. And so when I'm reading his research, and again, this is before they deleted it, I'm like, my head is blowing up. I mean, I remember I was writing my book and I was researching this guy, and I literally had like an out-of-body experience. Like I was so connected to this research and so into this, like, oh my God, what is going on with melanin in our bodies? Like, what is it really the key to? But anyway, he theorized that melanin corticoid receptor complexes in our body was the gateway to divinity. That literally melanin represented our ability to literally like go through portals and converge with source. I mean, he had incredible theories, but the bottom line is that he also theorized that like using melanoid corticoid receptor complex peptides could alter consciousness. So I was like, whoa, like I've been using Melanotan now for the last 5 or 6 years. Like, what do you mean by that? So anyway, I started getting deeper into his research, and I realized that like, okay, I'm going to inject Melanotan in microdoses, because at that point I was only using it for tanning. And so I was using not heavier dosages, but more dosages more around just tanning. And that would be like 2 or 3 of 40 units or 50 units twice, a week. And that was when I wanted to be really tan. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to start microdosing this based on his observations or his theories. And literally within a week, I was like, wow. Now I never left my body. I have left my body plenty of times in my life, but I wasn't leaving my body from Melanotan-1. But if you take a micro dose, and I'll tell you, I mean, it's really basically 0.2 to 0.3 units. So a 10 milligram vial, it's like 200 micrograms to 300 micrograms. And you then immediately inject it like right when you wake up in the morning, and then you go out in the sun and you meditate, contemplate, become introspective, sit in nature, whatever it is you do for your inner work. It's crazy how much faster you can get into that silent mind state. And again, now I've been doing it successfully for about 7 years, ever since I found out about it. And I think I might have been the first person on this planet to actually write about this in the way that I did, because I started having people reach out to me. It was about 2017. My book came out in 2018, but there were excerpts of the book in the biohacking community. And so people were reading that before the book was published, because the book wasn't published until the end of February 2018. But people started reaching out to me at the end of 2017 and then ever since. And they asked me, like, what's the dosing, blah, blah, blah. And I've gotten so much positive feedback from people who say, dude, you're right. Like, I used to have biochemists like just say, you're full of shit. There's no way. How could I have missed this? You know, I know way more about this kind of stuff than you do. And I'm like, dude, try it. Trust me, try it. And so now I have like really advanced world-class, you know, molecular engineers and biochemical engineers, like doing all sorts of stuff with it and taking it higher dosages and snorting it, you know, doing nasal mist with it and stuff. But it's a pretty profound peptide to, like I said, to really silence the mind and to get into, you know, inner work journeying and stuff like that. And again, there are people that are doing way different things with it than I do. But I like to say, or I like to think that I was probably the first person that put it out there. And it was all, you know, I take no credit. It was all from the work of Frank Barr, who was just a researcher who was missed, who, you know, they probably intentionally covered it up.
Probably. It sounds super fascinating, and you know, I'll definitely be experimenting in no time. So let's finish off with, you know, this whole story around GLP-1s and the war on GLP-1s
Yes.
as well, which is unwarranted, because ultimately, again, when we understand GLP-1s, we understand that the body produces GLP-1s
Yes.
naturally. But again, most of us have suppressed function. Why?
Yep.
Because our bodies are, you know, generally not functioning anywhere near optimum because of endocrine dysfunction and all the things that we've said already. So, what is the magic around GLP-1s, and especially what is the controversy? You know, let's get into that, which is again it's all a question about dosage.
Yes.
Number one. And number two, context. So are people on a full protocol, or are they just given the GLP-1 pre-mixed, which we know has tons of preservatives, which is also something that you don't freaking want to have in your body, right? So that's the split currently. It's when we are using GLP-1s the way that pharma wants us to use them, where we're getting the preservatives, we're getting the crazy high dosages, we're not getting the full protocol, versus what research labs can provide and what people like you and I can provide in terms of actual guidance. But obviously, you know, I want to hear it from you, the expert, and especially I want to hear about Retatrutide,
For
because
sure.
I'm about to order that as well, and it sounds incredible. I personally have been on tirzepatide, and you know, it's something like I never thought that I would, but the smallest dose,
Yes.
I'm literally on what is it? It's basically a quarter or less than a quarter. I always remember ticks because my husband
Yeah.
does the
It's like
math.
so 2.5 is like the weekly standardized dose. So you're probably literally on like 0.6 a week.
Yes,
Yeah. Yeah.
yes.
So you set me up perfectly. So thank you for that. This is my favorite topic to talk on in the world, because as I said earlier in the show, and this has been an amazing show, and I really appreciate you having me on. It's great. I can't wait to see this when it comes out. I'm definitely going to share it everywhere. But it's mind blowing how many highly intelligent people have a totally inaccurate viewpoint and understanding of GLP-1s. And again, this is due to the mainstream talking smack about it, making all this negative propaganda, all this, again, fear porn, fear-based propaganda that these things are horrible drugs. And as you know, let's just call them the dark agent media doctors. And I don't have to name their names. I'd love to, but I just won't, because I usually do, but I won't. They glom onto the stories and they say, these are terrible for people. And you can't give these to people, and anybody who's prescribing these to people should be in jail and blah, blah, blah. And it's as you know, but
Yeah.
it's the total opposite. In fact, I would argue it's not even debatable at this point, based on the peer review and the science that's out there, that these are the single greatest adjuvants in the history of Western medicine. They're
Absolutely.
even more they're more influential than penicillin, and that's a strong statement. But when people understand the science behind these drugs and how it's not just, and you know this, but for your audience, it's not just for fat loss and helping people with diabetes. These drugs are literally changing brainwave patterning for the better. They are eliminating addictive, compulsive, dissociative personality traits. They are getting rid of alcoholism. They're getting rid of drug addictions. They're getting rid of people who are, have bipolar. I mean, it's literally insane what these are doing from a positive standpoint to the insulin metabolism and the brainwave patterning. Right. So both of these, I mean, and again, there's never been any drug in the history of pharmaceutical science that are this powerful. Now, here's something that you probably don't know yet. And I know this personally because of my personal use of them. Now, I've had my blood, very powerful, full diagnostic biomarker measurement labs done twice this year, on March 6th and 2 weeks ago. And I have been measuring, as I'm very meticulous, obviously, because I've been on hormones and peptides for so long, but I have been measuring my labs since meticulously since 2000, because I started on therapeutic testosterone in 1999 at the age of 29. And so 25 years later now, I have 25 years of labs. And if you, Alex, could see my biomarker change from March to now, so 5.5 months, and that was in March, it was, in March, I just started Retatrutide, and we're going to get to Retatrutide in a second. But as you know and love, I've been using Tirzepatide in microdosages for 2 years previous. And Tirzepatide is amazing. I'll sing its praises until I die. It's an amazing drug. It's by far the best FDA approved, medically indicated. People know about GLP peptide by far. It destroys semaglutide / Ozempic. But I mean, they're not even comparison. But the truth is that I had been using Tirzepatide the 2 previous years, and I had seen amazing changes in my cholesterol levels and my triglyceride levels and my LDL levels and a bunch of other things. But this year, since I started microdosing Retatrutide, the changes were so profound that my doctor literally, and again, I've been talking to this doctor, my online doctor, for 6 years. He was just, his head exploded. He's like, this is impossible. He's like, what is this doing? And I'm like, it's the Retatrutide. Now, because he's a doctor, he can't support my uses of Retatrutide because it's not clinically approved still, right? I mean, it's an Eli Lilly pharmaceutical, and it will be available and clinically approved next year. But it's only people like us, biohackers, people in the underground economy and underground markets, who are using these research products, which again are the same. There's no difference, right? People think that, the pharmaceutical version is better than the research version. No, it's not. If you understand anything about biochemistry, it's the same drug. It's the same. It's not changed. It's just one's patented and one isn't. It's all money. It's a money grab. But at the end of the day, to get back to what I was saying about the big picture of GLPs, all these people that are doing them wrong are really not to be blamed, because they're doing them wrong because of their doctors.
Yeah.
So you have all these, just call them quack doctors, who are system doctors, right? They're insurance takers. And they're looking at GLPs as a new profit center. Like, I can write a script to every Tom, Dick, or Harry or Susan that comes into my office who has a weight problem, who's depressed, who feels like shit. And now we're getting back into the original conversation of all these people that, have a hormone deficiency and aren't getting that treated. And so now, instead of giving them the SSRI or the pink or blue pill, now they can write a GLP script. So that's what they're doing, right? And this is literally how it goes, because I've probably talked to hundreds of men and women who've told me their stories. And the doctor will say, okay, you want to lose weight. And of course, everybody's fat, everybody's got metabolic derangement or insulin resistance. So they're like, yeah, doc, I want to lose 30 pounds. I want to lose 60 pounds. I want to lose 70 pounds. And so the doc says, okay, no problem. I'm going to write you a script for Mounjaro, and I want you to take this amount. They give them a pen, or they give them a vial with a clicker, or they tell them exactly what it is. They don't teach them anything. And they say, just take this and then come back and see me in 10 weeks. They don't tell them that they have to eat 1 gram of protein per pound of lean body mass. And really the best way to say that, because nobody knows how to calculate their lean body mass, is say 1 gram of protein for your goal weight. So if you're a morbidly obese woman of 265 pounds and you were 140, in your prime, then you should be eating 140 grams of protein. If you're a morbidly obese man and you were 185 in your prime and you're 300 now, then you should be eating 185 grams of protein. But the bottom line is they're not telling them that. And then they're also, and this is way more important, they're not telling them that they have to do resistance training. Now, whether it's weightlifting or hot Pilates or yoga or, again, some form of bone-bearing resistance training.
Yeah.
Because as you know, they're so strong and so profound that they will catabolize muscle if you don't eat enough protein and lift. You have to do that. So the world's number one prescribing GLP doctor is actually legit. He's in Miami. He's a good friend of mine. His name is Dr. Rudy Eberwein. He's actually interviewed in my course on GLPs for 90 minutes. And it's the most profound interview that I've ever done with anybody ever. And he talks about like all of the misconceptions and all the propaganda. And this is what he says. And this is a profound statement especially from a doctor like this. He says that any doctor who prescribes a GLP-1 peptide to a patient and doesn't get them to sign an affidavit that they have to eat enough protein and lift weights is guilty of malpractice. He says everyone. He says, in fact, the people that are suing Wegovy and Merck and now Lilly for all these lawsuits, which are all going to get thrown out in my opinion because they're bogus. But he's like, those doctors should be liable and on the hook for those because they never gave the instructions to their patients. Because as you and I know, if you do this right, which is obviously again enough protein, lift weights, do exercise, change your lifestyle, they're profound.
Absolutely.
So it's again, all these people, Alex, who are not afraid, but they're just lazy. They don't want to change their lifestyle. They don't want to eat. They don't want to lift. They don't want to exercise, blah, blah, blah. But here's the thing, and this is the real crux of the matter, and this is why it's so crazy, is that even doing it all wrong, they still lose weight.
Yes.
Because the appetite, as you know, suppression is so powerful that they just stop eating, right? So fat people will eat twice a day instead of 5 times a day.
Mm-hmm.
And so after the first 3 weeks or whatever, they drop 40 pounds, 35 pounds, 50 pounds or whatever, and they think it's the greatest thing ever. But then what they don't realize is they've destroyed their metabolism. They've crashed their thyroid levels. And the worst part is, as you know, in that time of losing the weight, they kept upping the dose. Because the body became used to the dosage. Instead of them exercising, lifting weights, eating enough protein, they kept taking more and more and more of the dose. So the pharmaceutical company makes more money, the doctor makes more money, and the patient loses more weight, but it's a vicious cycle that's about to come due. And once it comes due, it's a nightmare because now the person regains the weight. In fact, they usually rebound with 20 to 30 pounds more than what they started with at the top. They have a crash metabolism. They have blown out thyroid levels. And as you know, the worst part is they really do start getting Wegovy face, Wegovy chin, Wegovy neck, Wegovy ass, Wegovy wherever, which is the areas where it ate the muscle.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so they look like absolute dog, you know what? And so these are the people now that are suing, right? But again, what are they suing? They just did not have any understanding of doing this. So if you understand, again, just to reiterate one more time, where you are taking, well, let me go back one more thing, because you already said this. The pharmaceutical companies are invested in giving you the highest dosage to start. They're not teaching people to take start low, go slow, which is the microdose effect, which you and I do, and everybody who's successful using these. And by the way, thankfully, there's now millions of people that are using these successfully, and they know how profound they are. But we're still the minority, a very, very small minority. So the pharmaceutical company will still tell the people to up the dose every week. It's insane. Yep. Like I've had people come to me saying they're taking 20 milligrams a week of tirzepatide. I'm thinking to myself,
insane.
You wouldn't even be able to eat for a week if you took that much. Plus you'd be nauseous because you know what it does to you. I mean, it literally makes you not eat shitty food. You can't eat bad food. I mean, it's mind blowing. But so that's the medical establishment, profits keep their doctors ignorant. They don't want the doctors waking up. They don't want the doctors smart. They don't want the doctors telling the patients they should use a microdose. Are you kidding me? That's bad for profits. So they don't learn that. So again, the blame falls for sure primarily at the doctor's foot because he doesn't give the proper instructions. But a lot of doctors will say to me, "But Jay, we didn't learn. They're not teaching us from the pharmaceutical companies. They're not doing weekend seminars teaching us how to prescribe these things. They're just telling us what they want us to see or what we see on the news."
Absolutely.
So it's like, if I'm a doctor and I'm clueless, but I know I can charge my patient, because remember, a lot of these people are type 2 diabetic diagnoses. So they just charge them through their insurance, and the insurance, pays the doctor a huge fee. So these people are paying their copayment and maybe another $80 or $75, and they get 25 milligrams, which lasts them 2 weeks. And then they come back and they pay another 75. Meanwhile, the doctor's billing probably $3,000 to insurance. And insurance is giving him another $2,200 a kickback or whatever it is. So, it's a massive profit industry, but obviously all of those people are screwing up. And that's where all the negative propaganda comes. Now let's talk about Retatrutide for you, because it's literally, oh man, I think it's the most insane, most profound medication probably ever. I have people in my inner circle. So just for the record, for everybody that knows, Retatrutide, so tirzepatide, which you're using now and which I used previously, is what is called a double or dual stage agonist. And what that means is there's two peptide hormone pathways that it addresses for fat loss. Retatrutide is the first GLP peptide that actually addresses all three pathways for fat loss. So it addresses appetite suppression, GIP, which is what tirzepatide addresses, which is glucagon, insulin peptide or independent peptide. And then the last one is it increases white adipose tissue at rest, which actually becomes brown fat or brown adipose tissue. And then brown fat is metabolically thermogenic. So you're basically, while you're standing here at rest, your metabolism is faster. Mm-hmm. So it's like it's the holy grail of fat loss. It's hitting all three pathways of fat loss when you take this drug. And so for people who are looking to lose weight, have a better mindset, have a better mood, feel better, I would argue, even though people were debating me now because I've been talking about this on podcasts, I think it's anabolic. Now, when I say it's anabolic, it would probably be biochemically more anti-catabolic, which means it's so effective, it won't let you burn muscle. So you can take a microdose of this and it will burn fat. It will enhance your metabolism. It will make you feel better. It will clean up the brain. It will get rid of food noise and anything else going on in the head. And it will probably prevent you from losing muscle. That's how effective it is. Now, again, it's all relative to the dosage.
Yeah.
When I first started taking this medication, I was probably one of the first people on the planet because Limitless, my research chemical company that I promote, sent it to me in June, I think it was the end of June, early July last year. And I was in the middle of a tirzepatide cycle. And so I was like, I'll experiment with it at the end of July or whatever. It was early August. And there was no data. We know nothing about dosing on it. And the doses they were using with obese people. In fact, the studies were in obese diabetic women. And they were taking anywhere from 6 to 15 milligrams a week. So I was like, well, that's a lot, but I'll just start at 4. Again, I had no bearing. I mean, I was using 2 to 2.5 milligrams of tirzepatide at the time. We didn't understand the microdosing at that point like we do now. And so I was just like, okay, well, they're taking 6 to 15. Let me just take 4 because that seems like it'll give me I'll notice something. And so I took it, and I'm not kidding you. It was so effective that it literally made my body hot. Because again, it's 3, right? There's 3 agonists. It's increasing metabolism. It's increasing GIP. And it's obviously suppressing appetite. And I was hungry because I was so hot. I was burning calories at such an accelerated rate that I was like, wait a minute, this is supposed to be a GLP. It's supposed to appetite suppressing, but I'm actually hungry on this. I can't take this. What I didn't know was the dosage was too high. Right. And again, as everyone is finding out with all of these GLPs, what medicine recommends is not the right path. They recommend the path to make money. And the path to health is a low, surgically precise microdose. And everyone's dose is going to be smaller, right? Like depending on the size of you as a human being, as a man or a woman. I like to think that a dosage for a man or a woman is usually a quarter to a half more for a man versus a woman. Now, obviously, that doesn't apply to everyone because there's very small men and there's very big women. So it just depends. But at the end of the day, a microdose of retatrutide that works amazingly well in everyone, and again, men and women and thousands of people I've talked to are advised, is somewhere between 0.15 and 0.50. And that's used either daily. So you can absolutely take 0.15 daily, or you can take 0.5 or 0.35 or somewhere in between every other day. And obviously, as you know, this is a lot different than previous instructions where people were saying, oh, you take one shot a week.
Yeah.
You know, and obviously a much higher dosage or bolus, as a doctor would say. And those, while effective, they don't work in the way that we want them to, because as you know, the one thing that we don't want to have with the GLP is not the ability to eat. We don't want to have it where we look at food and we're like nauseous, or we're like, oh, I can't eat. I just can't eat. My appetite's gone. We want to gradually still eat, but eat a lot less. So we want our metabolism to be like, okay, I know I need to eat food. I know I need get enough protein. I know I need to drink enough water, but I don't need to eat as much as I normally think. And again, this is not talked about or stressed, but the environment is so contaminated that we have all these horrible toxins, pathogens, virulent agents in our stomach, in our microbiome, that are basically shutting off our body's natural satiation signals. So most people overeat. Even skinny, lean, healthy people will overeat the crap because, as you know, all these foods are engineered. They make them what they call them the hyperpalatability of food. And it's chemicals that the microbiome in the gut crave. So it's like you're eating it and it turns off the signals that your body is full and you just keep eating shit. So one of the things that GLPs do tremendously well, I might add, is they upregulate the amount of natural GLP circulating hormone in the microbiome in the gut so that your satiation signals come back to where they should be as a natural human living on Earth. And so that's what's actually happening. And that's why I say that the microdosing of these are much more effective to circadian rhythm, to natural cell functioning, to natural blood flow. I mean, everything is enhanced / optimized with microdoses of GLPs. And again, retatrutide, because it's a triple stage, is unbelievable. And I had to go back on talking to people because I told people last year, I was very open about this. You're on my email list. You've probably seen this. I told people that I was not a big fan of retatrutide originally, and it was because I was taking too much. And I didn't understand. And so I told people, if you're going to take retatrutide, you got to also take tirzepatide with it, because you need the appetite suppression from tirzepatide, because retatrutide is going to enhance your metabolism so much. But what I obviously didn't realize was that if you just microdose retatrutide, you would get all those same effects that you were getting from TERS. So I think you're going to love retatrutide. I don't know anybody that's gone from TERS to Reta and not said Reta was better, but obviously it's, again, the dosage.
Amazing. Well, Jay, I can't express enough how grateful I am for not just this instance where I obviously got to really luxuriate in all your wisdom and exchange thoughts, but everyone out there, if you want to know about peptides, do yourself a favor, follow Jay Campbell, get on his email list, rummage on his website, because it is really a wealth of knowledge. It's kind of like my daily bread, so to speak. I mean, I'm constantly in there reading and researching and just deeply appreciating the work that you do. And I always love, for me personally, when I discover people like you, because and I say this in full honesty, people like you reinstill my faith in freaking humanity.
Thank you.
After the 2020 shit show, I was like, you know what, like I don't even want to be here anymore.
I'm the same way. Believe me. I think all people like you and I, and there's many of us, thankfully, we're such conscious leaders and healers that there's days where we're just like, why are we doing this?
Totally. Totally.
You look in the mirror and you're like, I love helping people, but what's the purpose of it all?
Yeah. Well, and when sometimes it's such a freaking fight, right? I mean, that's why I'm so bored. I'm bored of the fight. It's just boring now. It used to be like, okay, yay, I'm here to fight for the good. Nah, you know, I've got my channels and, I'm creating ways of like, if you want the information, here I am. I ain't gonna like try and seduce you anymore,
Right.
because it's just kind of boring. But yes, so deeply grateful for you, Jay, and I'm definitely going to be continuing to following what you have to say. It's profound. And, for those of you out there listening, really at this stage of the game, if we are not doing peptides and we want to be optimal, what are we doing?
Yeah.
What are we doing?
Yeah. Bioregulators, peptides, hormones. It's the only way to stay, again, as I like to say, empowered, sovereign, and free. You have no option. I mean, we didn't even talk about this, right? But like, you can't even go into a hospital or a medical center anywhere in the world now these days without the fear of them doing something to kill you. Like literally kill you.
Absolutely.
Like literally kill you. Like I tell people all the time. And when I moved to Tampa, Florida, which was a year ago, we always find really good veterinarians and I make deals with them. And I say, hey, look, man, if it comes down to it, can you remove gunshot? Can you remove shrapnel? Can you remove, foreign bodies? And they're always like, if you pay me cash, absolutely. So, I mean, I ask those questions all the time because, I mean, again, if you understand the medical system in this planet, the westernized medical system, you have a higher chance of dying in a hospital than you do anywhere else. The number 2 cause of death in the world is malpractice. 100%. It's like, again, doctors are practicing on your body, on your physical being. Why would you give them any chance? I always tell people this too, like as you get older, don't go in for the bullshit routine diagnostic tests. Those are all scams. Every single one is a scam. Colonoscopies, mammographies, prostate, sweeps, all of it is nonsense. You are a physiological 100%. Being designed perfectly by source, and only you not living healthy and not living clean can cause those problems. And again, we create reality through our thoughts, right? So if we focus on disease and diagnoses, which are most of the time BS that they give us, you will create that reality. So stay away from it. Opt out.
100%. Yeah, no, I mean, I realize like you and I could be doing, a whole series on, a gazillion topics to get people out of the fear of the medical system. And, like to me, the running joke in my family, I don't share it with my family of origin, is that my parents, every single year, they went to the Mayo Clinic in Germany and spent 10,000 euros for a 48-hour checkup, right? So they would go in there, 48-hour, check everything. Every single time they would come out with a clean bill of health. Meanwhile, my dad, big belly, a lot of stuff going on. I'm going, you got a clean bill of health? Yeah.
Total scam.
Year after year, right?
It's pay for play. It's literally pay for play. And the people that don't pay all that money and do the BS diagnostic tests and stuff like that, the bare minimum, they're the ones that come out with the cancer diagnosis or the tumor or the growth. It's like I always say this is a joke, right? But I always say this. I say, if you ask a doctor or a surgeon if they should remove something, do you think they're going to say no? That's how they make money, by cutting you. I mean, it's insane. Why give them the opportunity?
It is. And if once we see through that, then in some ways we can even go, you know what? It's not even their fault because they have spent so many years, so much money to be part of that system.
Yes.
They also have to feed families. I mean, I fully get it, and I have 100%. Had doctors tell me, look, Alex, I got to feed my family.
Exactly.
I know what you're talking about.
It's the same thing. It's just like voting. It's just like being a part of the system.
Yeah.
It's not when they focus and they say, oh, it's your God-given right to vote and you have to be a part of it. No, you don't. You can absolutely choose to opt out and become an empowered, sovereign, and free citizen and have nothing to do with that scam. But you're right. You have to awaken. And you said something so brilliant at the beginning of this podcast. It's the hijacking of the pineal gland and the amygdala so that these people are so fear-based that they cannot think for themselves. They cannot discern. They have no critical thinking skills and everything is fear-based. And again, we have to have, truthfully, we really do have to have eyes of compassion for them because they are not capable of getting out of that fear. I mean, hopefully in some incarnation at some point they will, but right now they're done. They were hijacked during COVID and it's over.
Yes. What I teach my people is the minute that you are in fear about anything really, right?
Yep.
Where that fear grips you,
Yep.
that second is when you know you are hijacked.
Exactly.
So instead of giving into it, we need to open the door of consciousness and go,
Yes.
right now I'm hijacked. There is another reality, right? And that's always to me the doorway into what we're teaching, what many other people like us are teaching, to go, there is another way.
Yes.
And lastly, what I teach and what I want to just, share here is never fall into any kind of dogma.
Right.
Right? Because any kind of dogma, no matter on which side, is always obstructing a view of the full truth. Because ultimately, I feel we live in a reality where when we choose it, this is paradise, in spite of the toxicity, whatever. It's like, wow, we can have an amazing, incredible life, but we need to unhinge from the clutches of the collective consciousness, the predominant collective consciousness.
Beautiful.
So thank you so much, Jay.
You're
I
welcome.
am deeply grateful, and hopefully this will not be the last time that we're going to have a conversation. Thank you.
It definitely will not be the last time we have a conversation. And anytime you would like me, I would bring you on my podcast, but actually I just ended the Jay Campbell podcast after 10 years. Nobody knows yet. There's 2 more episodes. I am going to be doing live streams. So if you ever would like to come on a live stream, they're usually on Sunday nights at 8 p.m., but I'd love to have you on.
Absolutely.
And we can talk, we could go super deep. But this was, I mean, again, I'm honored and humbled and really privileged to be on your show because, like I said, my wife is in your audience. And when she said, when I told her that, that I was doing this podcast, she was like, "Are you serious?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm serious." And she's like, "Okay, well, be ready. She's on it." And I'm like, "Oh, I'm going to be ready. I'm familiar with her teachings and work and stuff like that." So again, it was very much an honor for me to be here tonight. And thank you for having me. And I thought it was a really amazing conversation. It really was.
Thank you, Jay.
You're welcome.